Hello and welcome to another tutorial for DriveTheLane.com, the world's greatest college basketball simulation. I am your host, Stoneman, and today we're going to be discussing coaching your team. So let's just get right into it. Here's my sign-in page. I'm just going to go to My Team and then My Team. So this brings you to this page here with all your players and their attributes, what position you have them in. There's lots of drop downs for coaching. So to get started, we'll do the team settings. There are only three, and they're all drop downs. So for pace, slow, normal, fast, if you know anything about basketball, you kind of get what this means. You can play a run and gun style, probably going to get more points or more shots at least, but more turnovers, maybe more fast breaks going in both directions. And then obviously slow is kind of the opposite of that, a little more methodical, using more of the shot clock, not giving up as many fast break points the other way, but certainly not getting as many looks at the basket yourself either. So those are your choices there. Coming over to the next drop down here, we have normal. So zone, normal, and man-to-man. Again, if you know anything about basketball, you kind of know what this looks like. For man-to-man, maybe you want defenders that are a little more athletic to stay with their individual man. Zone, maybe not the same emphasis on athleticism, maybe more on size or intelligence or something like that. You can kind of decide where you think these things are important. And also maybe take into account how many scores your opposition has. So, whether they only have one go-to guy or if they have a few options, how many defenders do you have? Do you only have one shutdown guy, or do you have a solid all-around team defense? All impacts there. And then shooting threes. This is just how often you want your team to shoot threes. So if you think you have lots of good long-distance shooters, you want to go ahead and jack up a lot of threes. That's great. If you want to be a little more conservative, less risk, less reward, I guess, but that's your prerogative here. So pretty straightforward. All this stuff is pretty simple. And then if we come down to your lineup, these are obviously individual coaching instructions for your players. I'll start from the right. This is shoot threes, how often you want a player to shoot threes. I have a lot of ones here. It's a drop down from 1 to 9. So 9 is, green light, shoot as many threes as you want. 1 is just don't shoot threes. And everything in between. You'll see on the attributes, there's no 3-point shooting attribute. It's just shooting. And that shooting attribute is comprised of a few different things. So there's free throw shooting, there's mid-range, there's finishing in the lane, there's shooting from threes. So you don't really know, even if you have an excellent shooter, he may not be an excellent 3-point shooter. So you just have to experiment. In the preseason, I like to leave all these numbers pretty high to let them shoot so I can see if they make them or not. But that'll be up to you how you want to try to figure that out, how that builds into your team philosophy. The next column here is just shooting in general. So how often you want them to shoot. So if you have a dominant center inside, you can put him as 9 shooting, but a 1 shooting threes. That'll mean lots of opportunities for him to touch the ball in the paint, try to finish at the rim ideally without taking lots of jump shots. So those are your shooting drop downs. The one here, subbing, this is important to recognize that this means subbing out. So for example, my starting point guard, normal, less, or more, I have him subbing out more, meaning playing less minutes. So I guess maybe that's a little counterintuitive until you get used to it, but this is how often you want them to sub out. So if you feel like you have, for example, I do this because I have an excellent defender at backup point guard. So especially when I know my upcoming opposition has a high scoring point guard, I want that backup with excellent defense to play more minutes. So that's kind of how you use that. Conversely, if you had a stud point guard and not a good backup, maybe you want him to sub out less, or just tell this guy to sub out more and get your starter back in there. That's kind of how it works. That's all of the coaching from your team page. Lots of experimenting. Another factor here is that stamina will be hidden in among the athleticism attribute. So you'll have to figure out which guys can handle what kind of workload. Another thing, there are hidden attributes within the game. You can't see them, but we know they're there. So for example, you might have a player who's selfish, so he might not like playing fewer minutes, whereas a team player won't mind. So all different kinds of stuff you'll have to play with. Some guys just tend to score more or shoot better as a starter than they do off the bench, or vice versa. So lots of room for experimentation within the game. One more screen here. If you go up to my team and then down to practice, you can set a primary and a secondary team practice. This is a drop down with lots of different stuff you can practice. You can see here these first 3 free throws, finishing, jump shooting, those are all within the shooting attribute. Like I mentioned before, there's a little more to it than first meets the eye from this screen. So you can pick two things. The team primary practice does have the biggest impact on your player development. And then the secondary practice and the individual assignments kind of have the next most impact. So again, a list to pick from. You can kind of assume, defense is pretty straightforward. Dribbling and passing will both have to do with the hands attribute. Film study, maybe improve their intelligence. Again, speed and agility and stamina, both part of the athleticism attribute. So lots of room there. You can decide if you want to maybe try to round out a player. Like this guy has none intelligence. I'm trying to raise that. Conversely, I could try to just say, you know what, this guy's only good at one thing. I'm going to maximize that and train his hands. Just stuff for you to play with. And that's pretty much it. The one thing to realize is that your players do improve even when you don't see it. Training happens every Saturday when the game gets updated. You might not see this guy, for example, go from none to poor. Even if I have him studying films for 4 years, he still might not actually visibly bump from none to poor, but he is getting better. I like to think of these attributes kind of as a spectrum from 0 to 100. So maybe none is 0 to 20, poor is 21 to 40, etc. I don't know that that's actually how it works, but you'll see after playing this game that there are certainly high good shooters and low good shooters, for example. So there is room for improvement even if you're not seeing it. But that's it. We covered coaching, we covered practice, and lots of experimentation ways for you to play around and try to improve your team. One last thing, the more minutes these guys play, the more chance they have to practice and learn from their mistakes and get better. So if you have a project freshman who you really want to maximize his potential, play him a lot of minutes, even if he doesn't necessarily deserve them as an underclassman. Certainly one strategy to decide how you want to coach your team. And that's really all you need to know about coaching on drivethelane.com.